There are moments created by master filmmakers which unleash your childhood fears.
Something can come in and bite you on the neck and turn you into this horrible vampire.
They infuse our nightmares.
The film was so strong that I was sort of worried that I caught some plague off the film.
And terrify us.
Almost every horror movie now has that last little
They push the boundaries.
It's those moments when you think this filmmaker is dangerous.
They make us scream.
For half the movie, I was like,
and jump out of our seats.
First time the shark jumped up, and I jumped. I didn't go out and around like, Daddy. It was just boom, boom.
These are the moments we never forget.
Even Pinhead, who doesn't do a decent, nice thing through 8 movies, but somehow or other still manages to get fan mail from women who would like to bear his children.
Presenting the 100 Scariest Movie Moments, a countdown of the greatest moments of cinema shock.
It was the film that your friends' older brothers had seen when it would play in the drive-in. When you were a kid, you weren't old enough to see, but you just heard about how notorious this film was.
It's revolting and horrible and shocking and visceral and taboo-breaking and nasty and unforgivable all at the same time.
I think I saw about the first 4 minutes of Last House on the Left.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie.
I just knew that I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Only a movie.
You have this virgin that is raped by a bunch of robbers, and the father seeks retribution.
In such a simple story, encapsulated kind of so much of the human condition about violence coming out of people that you never think it could come out of, or nations.
It became a sort of political statement about the nature of repressed violence in American society.
As we'd gone to see one of those Man with No Name Clint Eastwood movies, and by actual count, I think there were something like 300 dead bodies. And, you know, armed with that sort of philosophical orientation to peace and love, flower children went out to make this violent film.
Sights and sounds far beyond anything you've tested.
You think, what the hell was going on at the time that someone would think to do this? And if you think about it, from television, the images people were getting were saturated with Vietnam, and then they turn on the radio and it's Harry Nilsson music. You'd have these unbelievably violent, disturbing scenes, and then this kind of goofball folk music where they're like ripping up on these girls and you hear this wheels turning.
David Hess is terrifying. I think he scared me more than any horror monster when I was a kid.
Everybody wanted to make an anti-violent film. Well, how do you do that, given the subject matter, given the violence of the subject matter? You push the envelope.
Shoot the mom, rape the daughter, kill the dog, burn the dad.
It's one of those films that you don't think, oh, I've got an evening free, I'll watch Last House on the Left.
I just watched it again just the other day, and it feels like you're watching a snuff movie.
I never felt the really full strength of how appalling what we were doing was, even though I knew mentally, until the death of Phyllis, who was killed in the woods and stabbed repeatedly until she's virtually disemboweled.
Even now, the British censors will not allow it to be shown uncut.
We filmed that, I remember, in one morning, and when it was all over, we broke for lunch. Everybody was covered with artificial blood, and I just remember everybody went off by themselves, and nobody ate.
Diabolique is a French psychological horror film that took American audiences very much by surprise. People were calling it the scariest movie ever. People were saying it out-Hitchcocked Hitchcock.
I don't think without it we would ever have had Psycho.
It's the story of 2 women, one of whom is married to a very abusive man, the headmaster of a boys' boarding school, the other of whom is having an affair with him. She's a teacher at the school. And the way the 2 of them conspired to kill him.
The scariest thing is where you think Vera Clouseau's husband is dead, and then she's sort of awoken at night.
that surprise, shock moment that in fact causes a heart attack. Almost caused some of the people in the theater to have a heart attack.
Stephen King once told me, look, the cliches in Hollywood are that you keep every monster in the dark. You never see the face of the devil. Don't ever show it. He said, however, if you can come up with something that's so astonishing looking on screen, you'll hit a home run out of the ballpark. They'll never forget it. So being stupid, I said, let's try that.
The alien is a microscopic organism that whatever it touches, it can replicate genetically.
What Carpenter did so well is creating this unbelievable sense of paranoia.
We don't know who's a thing and who isn't. And it was also a chance to just let loose with special effects, something I had not done before. There's one scene that's my particular favorite. The head rips off and grows stalks and crawls across the floor. That whole thing peeks around the corner, and that took it to such a level. I thought, you know, this is so, how cool is this? It's so great. It's so nuts.
Kurt Russell has this way of actually figuring out if you're the alien or not.
The blood test scene when they're all strapped in. I mean, there's nothing better than that.
And the way Carpenter shoots it is so smart because, you know, Carpenter is like Howard Hawks. He's extremely sparse with his camera. He just makes it almost a mathematical type of montage where you're feeling rhythmically secure, and then BAM!
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
McCready, burn it!
I would say it's one of the top 10 scares of my life. I never understood why it was not successful. In Mexico, it was successful. I saw it in a packed theater, and it was full of happy Mexicans seeing tentacles and viscera and liquids, and all of us were like screaming in a soccer match. And they were like, ah!
Nosferatu is, to this day, an extraordinary film and one of the creepiest movies ever made.
It is the first real adaptation of Dracula, and it is a phenomenal one.
There's an insanity there. You get the sense that the guy maybe really, you know, he's really way too into it. I really like it. And this, we're talking about, you know, silent movies where everybody's overacting.
F.W. Murnau was a truly innovative filmmaker. He wasn't content just to point a camera at things that were moving and record them, and was always experimenting, was always looking at ways to use light, to use setting.
Murnau uses real locations throughout, and to tremendous effect. We go off into the mountains, which are real mountains.
The story serves so that we can watch this incredibly frightening monster.
The bald head and the distorted face and the pointy ears and the huge teeth and the hands with the long nails.
He would turn his head. His eyes go first, and then his head follows, and he does this great stuff when Count Orlok rises.
He's not handsome, he's not suave. You wouldn't want to go to the opera with him.
Nobody has lived in that building for 3 years.
A supermodel moves into a brand new brownstone apartment that is a portal to hell.
Oh, yeah.
There is horror.
And she finds out she's the new gatekeeper.
There are scary, scary people with totally white eyes.
That crazy scene where the supermodel is walking through with one shoulder down.
Scary as hell. Scary as hell. Because you don't even know what's going on. Was that her dad? Was that some freaky guy? Did she build a robot and forgot about it?
What do you want from me? Who are you?
Each moment turned diaper rash into diaper rage. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Doesn't have your serial killer, it doesn't have your ghost, it doesn't have your monster created by man, it doesn't have your strange creature. The frightening thing of the Wicker Man is man's beliefs.
Whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood.
The Wicker Man is pretty much the definitive cult movie. It's based on the idea of a pagan cult living in a remote part of the British Isles, which, in order for their crops not to fail, needs to be fed a sacrifice.
I am here to investigate the disappearance of a young girl. In the name of God, woman, what kind of mother are you?
He comes from a British, staunch, stiff upper lip background, religious, and when he sees the people on Lonesome Rose Island being naked and just dancing around in the evening or copulating by the moonlight, he is completely aghast.
Dear God in heaven, even these people can't be that mad.
Is this place wonderful and pleasant? I mean, everybody's singing and dancing and happy and naked, but there's something very disturbing about it all, and why is everyone so secretive?
The entire time that Sergeant Howie has been looking for this missing girl, the girl hasn't been missing at all.
You are the fool, Mr. Howie.
The real sacrifice is Sergeant Howie himself.
Oh my God!
When that scene hits, you're like him, you're like, oh my God.
And the last sequence of the film, in which the screaming, shouting Edward Woodward is hauled bodily up into the Wicker Man and then set fire to, even as he screams out to his Christian God and sings hymns whilst the flames engulf him, is absolutely mesmerizing.
It doesn't feel for me the way they might have in the old witch trials or Jesus on the cross or whatever. It's a group of people being like, yay!
When I was watching it, I started looking around the room. What's going on? What's behind that mirror? Something's wrong.
It's basically about a rich guy who gets a birthday present from his brother.
He's reaching the birthday that his father committed suicide.
Here you go, happy birthday. I got you some steaks from Omaha Steaks. No, I didn't. I got you a really creepy and horrible game where this company is gonna come in and rearrange your whole life and mess with you.
That's the game, which ends up being this corporation that you think at the beginning is just sort of, a fun role-playing type of game.
Michael Douglas is a character who it would take a lot to change him, to change his life, and so this game is almost more than he can tolerate. And you're never sure just how far the game has gone.
Are you following me? Find out about a company called Consumer Recreation Services.
You don't know who's playing the game and who's not playing the game, and where the periphery of this game is. Where does it end?
This was one of David Fincher's early movies. He's very good at establishing a mood where you're not sure if you're still in reality.
My worst nightmare, anyway, is that everyone's out to get you, and that everyone's in on the joke except you.
When he comes home and everything's rearranged, and there's this clown staring at him.
First of all, you don't know it's a clown at first. All you see is a figure lying in a very similar position to his father.
The clown grinning, someone's laughing at you. And who is laughing at you and why?
Everyone's in on it, and you're not.
One day I just was listening to a baby very angrily cry in a hysterical fit, and I said, gee, if this infant had the physical power to lash out, it would probably wipe out everybody in the room.
The opening of It's Alive is the best thing because it's just so wonderfully wacky.
It's a real twist on what should be the happiest moment of a couple's life turned into horror.
At the moment of birth, to have
your baby murder everyone in the room? I don't know. I think I'd send that one off to military school.
She starts to worry that there's complications, and the doctor keeps looking and saying, well, the head looks kind of big, but don't worry, you're fine. God, the head looks really big. You're okay.
I always think that things that are small are more frightening than things that are large.
He runs, he hears all the screaming, and he runs in the hospital room.
Begins to fly on the full moon. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
I witnessed a sort of a weird burial in Yugoslavia when I was there on Kelly's Heroes I was a flunky.
He wrote American Werewolf when he was 19 years old, and the script didn't change much from that time until when he finally made it after having the success of Animal House and the Blues Brothers.
The reason they were burying him feet first, by the way, standing up deep in this thing, was so that his body wouldn't get up and cause trouble. And the guy, Sasha, the interpreter who talked to them and then talked to me, he thought it was very funny. And they were stupid peasants and stuff. And that's where I got the idea. I said, it is very funny, but what would Sasha and I do if the body got up?
And one of my favorite parts of the movie are the undead friends who are always talking to him.
Griffin Dunn keeps showing up, like, you know, getting worse and worse.
His face has been half ripped off, and then he makes a couple of other visits, and he's getting more and more deteriorated each time he comes back. And those moments are actually really creepy, and they're memorable, and they're well written.
I was trying to take something totally unreal and make it realistic. So, for instance, my guy turns into a wolf.
We've seen plenty of werewolves with lap dissolves and add some hair and a nose and the like. But to shoot a transformation in full, hard light, not in the shadows, not trying to hide any of the seams or anything, but showing everything right there.
And they show the whole thing, and, you know, it's just so creepy, and I think that he was hurting so much.
When he sees his hand go...
It looks so painful, and it looks like, you know, that you actually start to feel like you're going through that.
Especially where his face just comes apart. I can, like, still feel that.
It's horrifying, but it's really funny, too. And it is so John Landis.
It was films like that that just kept inspiring you, and you wanted to try to do makeup effects as good as that. You were never going to be able to, of course, but it was pushing the boundaries, and it was exciting.
If you're looking like from Last House on the Left, this is, you know, the next step. This is like Mad Max, Last House on the Left.
They wanted to see something different, but something different saw them first. The hills have eyes.
I was just doing general research on murder. Basically, I was in the New York Public Library and found this book called the Encyclopedia of Murder and Mayhem. And it had this great account of a family called the Shawnee Bean family in this, I think, 16th century that had been a feral family that was murdering people and literally eating them.
An American family who lost everything except the will to survive.
If you're faced with your life or the life of your child, you will find that place in yourself to retaliate and save yourself or them.
It's these two archetypes. You had these people, I guess, you know, from the suburbs or city life, clashing with these people in these desert dwellers.
You're driving through the desert, there's, you know, you get stuck, of course, and then you go checking out stuff. Very, kind of similar to, I guess, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
A family of people go out camping, and they run into a group of cannibals.
What began as a vacation ended as a nightmare.
Be hell to pay now.
casting Michael Berryman in The Hills of Eyes, that was kind of the crowning achievement, but at the time we just thought we have this guy that looks really strange.
Michael Berryman has got to be the most terrifying looking person. A creepy looking guy.
Shaved head, and he was just freaky looking. Every time he came on screen, I was just like, ah!
It was very unsettling. At the same time, he, you know, he was a good actor, so he could project this character that had foibles and was sometimes scared, and he was bested by his brother, and his feelings were hurt, and you had all this complexity. It sort of captured the best of what I hoped the movie would be about, which was that the good guys that first seemed like monsters turn out to be humans, too. The most appalling scene to me is the attack on the trailer with the death of the two mothers and the stealing of the baby.
How are you going with my baby?
Get out of the way, bitch!
Just the idea that we would kill these two mothers, you know, and steal the baby, I think from that point on, the audience was just, they were terrified that they were in the presence of a filmmaker who would subject them to anything.
Gothic literature and film are very much locked with a sense of place, and no one had that mastery at giving that place a dread like Baba.
Black Sunday is the first great horror movie to be directed by the very great Italian horror filmmaker Mario Bava.
Set in a spine-chilling atmosphere of fear.
One of the most beautiful black and white horror movies ever made.
Death! I've just seen death!
Having been a production designer, he wants to showcase his sets and his miniatures, and it's that love of his craft that makes all those painterly compositions in black and white so exquisite.
The opening of the film is justifiably famous.
When they put the mask and a hammer this big lodges it into place.
As Ours of the Witch, strapped to a stake, about to be burnt as a witch. Before that happens, a metal spiked mask.
I shall return to torment and destroy throughout the nights of time!
It was the first movie I sort of rushed back and saw 4 times in a row at the cinema. I went one day and then I just had to go again the next day and the next day and the next day.
What's the happiest place on earth but your shopping mall? And to turn that into, like, you know, hell.
Dawn of the Dead is basically a way to make fun of mall culture.
What a place, you know, you could hole up in here for forever. There's food, there's clothing, there's whatever you need. And I love the idea of it satirizing consumerism.
Why do the zombies keep coming to the mall? They're like, well, it's just something left over from their past. They just can't, you know, when they were alive, they just came here to get everything, so they just keep coming back.
Seeing the zombies in color, I don't know if that made them scarier, but it certainly made them bloodier.
I would cringe, and it was very early in the movie when they find a very small room and there's zombies feeding on a corpse. And there's just a moment where a zombie kind of rips flesh.
Tom and I would hang out at night, because we had to shoot at night in order to get into the mall. And, you know, I'd say, well, we need some new grisly way to kill somebody.
If you cast your head, we'd fill it up with, you know, corn cobs and rubbers filled with blood and cheese dip, anything on the craft service table, you know. And I took a double-barrel shotgun and blew it off.
A lot of great gags in that movie, and one of the ones that I always love as a favorite is the zombie coming towards them under the blades of the helicopter.
When the zombie walks too close to the helicopter and gets the top of his head cut off, I mean, come on.
Roger!
3, 2, 1, 0!
They're not fast, they're not strong, and they're not smart, but there are so many of them.
Coming up, a hug that's out of this world. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Look out! Take care. You are being watched.
Peeping Tom is a unique film, and it still remains so because it's one of the very few to deal with voyeurism.
One critic said I've gone to the most disgusting areas of society, but I've never seen something like this.
You had a cameraman, you know, obviously completely psychotic, using the third tripod on his camera as really, let's be honest, as like a phallus.
It's great, you know, psycho DP.
He takes the sheath off the spike and sticks it in his victims' necks while simultaneously photographing them.
And he's got a mirror above the camera so they can look at themselves screaming with terror as they die.
Probably the scariest sequence is the bit where the mother of the heroine, who is blind, comes in and the murderer realizes he doesn't have to turn off the film.
Senses the danger that threatens her and her daughter, but is helpless.
Don't be frightened. Don't be frightened. What? So put that camera away!
Critics were so disgusted that it basically ruined Michael Powell's career. He was never really given the opportunity to make another mainstream film.
William Castle was making movies when everybody in Hollywood was really afraid of television. He would pile all kinds of gimmicks on top of his films. You had to sign a release that if you suffered a heart attack from the terror of this film, you wouldn't sue the film company.
House on Haunted Hill is a great example of what William Castle does best. A gimmicky horror movie that brought out the audiences in droves.
I'm Vincent Price, and you're invited to my party in the House on Haunted Hill.
The House on Haunted Hill is a classic. A bunch of people invited to a party at the haunted house, and the scary things that happen, and the deaths that accrue over the course of the film. It defined one of the structures of what ultimately became the slasher films. A bunch of kids are together in a camp, and they die one by one.
It has one of my favorite shock moments of all time.
When they're like knocking on walls and moving around, they come up and that woman is there.
She seems to be pulling on a little skateboard or something. She's moving in a kind of a supernatural way.
That is still very scary. I study that damn scene and say, well, why is that so scary? It's the timing or whatever, the build-up. That woman, and then she floats out. Fuck me.
Cape Fear is everybody's fear, you know. It's like a bad guy is going to come and disrupt your family.
You identify with Gregory Peck. That's the whole point. You identify with Peck and his family, the archetypal, normal, happy American family. And along comes this guy.
Feel fear, numbing, paralyzing fear.
Who is so menacing, but so believably menacing, that he sends chills down your spine.
He's not frothing at the mouth. He's not mean or anything like that. He's just a guy who's just gonna come and kill you.
Robert Mitchum's character in Cape Fear was a prototype for Freddy, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers.
The Truck in Duel.
Jaws in Jaws.
Robert Mitchum. I've seen the worst, the dregs, but you are the lowest.
Robert Mitchum is so ahead of his time in that film in terms of sexual predator and rapist, and not apologizing and defending the character all the way.
I got a little plan for your wife and kids. They're never gonna forget. Never.
He says to Greg Peck, I'm not going to kill your family. I'm going to defile your girls. I'm going to rape your daughter and wife and then kill them. And it's a very distasteful setup. And again, it works because Mitchum is a brute and really scary.
When he stalks the daughter and the way and it's closer and closer.
He's here!
know, J.D. Thompson starts it with like, there's a lot of separation, and he just gets closer and closer and closer. She is set up almost as a Lolita, you know, innocent Lolita. And it's very frightening stuff.
It does have a lot of the mystery of the first one, but it's also an action movie.
Sigourney Weaver, now, that's a heroine that we can look up to.
When the character that Sigourney Weaver plays, Ripley, says, "Get away from her, you bitch."
Superwoman versus big bad bitchy monster.
The Queen alien, who was 14 feet tall and was not stop-motion animation, we built that puppet. And I'll never forget Jim Cameron coming to me when he had the idea, and he said, "Stan, I know what we're going to do. We'll put a couple of guys in a suit, and we'll carry them on a crane, and their arms will be the forearms of the creature, and we'll puppet the legs on the outside." And I'm looking at him and going, "You're lost your mind."
And the original Alien, having one alien was terrifying, but you could get away from it. There were ways you could get away. The alien wasn't everywhere. And in the sequel, they were everywhere.
The chest burster, the face hugger, the warrior alien, and we introduced a new one, the Queen alien. We allow these characters to become more alive by allowing them to do more than they did in the original movie.
This movie just took me totally by surprise. I think it was a big leap forward.
I walked up to one of those tubes, and the thing leaped at me and scared the hell out of me. I didn't know it was going to do that. Jim did that on purpose.
The face hugger in the original movie laid on a face and tightened its tail around a neck. The face huggers in this movie carried an entire scene.
One of the scariest moments is when Ripley and Newt are caught in that room where they were locked in the room with the one face hugger. Again, very much like the scenes with the raptors from Jurassic Park being caught in the kitchen. It's a sense that you're in an enclosed area. You can't get away.
Next, an 80s answer to teen sex. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Talking to the director, he said, "Here's a book, about Ted Bundy. Read it and tell me if that does anything for you." And I started reading this book about Bundy, and I went, "This sucks." Because that's not the movie I think I want to make. I don't want to play reality, I want to play fiction.
It's dark and it's rainy, and Rutger Hauer gets into his car, and as they start talking, Rutger Hauer sort of lets on that the previous family that picked him up, he dismembers him, and then he says in no uncertain terms that he's going to do the same to C. Thomas Howell.
He's a great villain, and he's got that great big interesting head.
And the minute he comes on and they hit you, you're like, okay, there's something going on with this dude, man. He's creepy.
Rutger Hauer in The Hitcher is absolutely bone-chilling. Rutger, you are twisted, you are mad.
He doesn't want to kill him. He just wants to just ruin his life.
They sort of develop a sick, sort of symbiotic relationship.
The sickest scene, the one scene I remember in The Hitch is when C. Thomas Howell is in the diner and he's eating his fries. He's picking them up, and all of a sudden he picks up this finger that the Hitcher is cut off, and he's like, "Rah!"
The final game is about to be resolved, which is the kid going to step up to the plane and shoot him through the head or not, and if not, then the girl will, be torn apart.
The scene where she gets drawn and quartered in that film is absolutely taking a road movie, a road thriller, and taking it into horror.
She's hyperventilating, and you're hyperventilating.
God. You useless waste. And they've got, you know, in the truck exhaust and the spinning wheels, and it's sadomasochistic and it's bondage.
Even at the end, you never sort of figure out what that relationship was. You're sort of left with, what the hell happened?
And things just start falling off. Ow! Walking on the wall, I'm like,
Cronenberg is a true poet of disgust. He taps into a very common human fear, which is the fear of decay of the flesh and the infidelity of our bodies. You know, the fact that your bodies betray you.
The film was produced by Mel Brooks. At the first screening of The Fly, the distributors or the publicists in question, believing it to be, you know, a film produced by Mel Brooks based on a kind of goofy science fiction horror movie, gave out weenie boppers to everybody, you know, Fly, because, hey, it's going to be The Fly, it's going to be really funny, and the whole audience sat there with all these, you know, these fly tentacles on their head. Oh, and then the film started, and then Jeff Goldblum's body started falling apart, and it became really not funny at all.
It's this scientist who wants to create a transporting device that goes very, very wrong. And Jeff Goldblum starts to merge genetically with a fly.
These bodily horrors are done in a way that no one else has ever even attempted, I don't think.
Most horror films work by building up tension and then releasing it in a scary scene. Cronenberg's films work by accumulating tension as they go. Oh, is he really going? Is he going to be worse this time when we see him? Is he going to be even worse this time when he see him? How could he be any worse this time when we see him?
oh, God, ow!
What's frightening is not just the monster that the character becomes, it's the character becoming the monster.
You give birth to something else, or something comes shooting out of your stomach. You know, those are always just the scariest, the most disgusting, the most, I can't believe this is happening to me moments.
Come on, you can push. You can push it up. You can push it up. Come on, push. That's it, come on. Push, use those muscles,
no,
that's it.
Wait.
Give us a push. You can push it up. Come on. That's it, come on.
No, wait, no.
You can do it.
Oh, wait, oh.
It's a pleasure to leave a Cronenberg film and to go out and step onto onto the firmament of a real sidewalk and look around at real people. But you know, you never quite look at them the same again.
If you lost a loved one, how far would you go to have that loved one back? And one of those forbidden questions, that led me to write this story, which I thought was so awful and so personal and so painful to write in so many ways, that the idea that it would ever become a book, let alone a movie, never even crossed my mind.
This cat gets hit by a truck. Father takes it, buries the cat comes back.
The small monster in a dream or in your imagination usually represents something that's repressed inside of you.
The son is now killed, which is tragic, but the father thinks, cat comes back. Let's do it with the son.
The body as a temple is an ideal. The body is actually meat. You know, it's animated meat. But the Pet Sematary kind of shows that. Body without soul is not life.
He takes the son and buries the son, and the son comes back. But it's not the same son. I think it's pretty phenomenal that Mary Lambert, a woman, directed Pet Sematary, and that a woman could be that dark and that sick
I can't imagine it being any harder or harder edged than it is now. The tendon slicing is the moment that seems to get everybody in the place where they really live. Just thinking about it. Ugh.
Where did you...
That was the one that the MPAA went after, but certainly not as bad as a chainsaw coming through the roof of the car and slicing out somebody's head or something.
It's the kid under the bed. The fact that he still looks like a kid, but we understand that he isn't a kid any longer. He's a demon. And then it's that one unprotected spot.
When you hear that,
that is so scary.
I almost didn't do it. I mean, I was so close to not doing it.
When I first read the script, I said, this is a piece of dreck, you know, and it's never going to be seen.
And in the meantime, I think this children's film that I've been working on, that's going to be the one that's going to put us over the top. I had no idea that Friday the 13th was ever going to be anything more than a potboiler.
When Friday the 13th came out in the summer of 1980, Halloween had set the stage. But Halloween, as great a film as it was incredibly suspenseful, but it wasn't bloody. It wasn't gory. And Friday the 13th really just took Halloween and the conventions of Halloween to the nth degree.
What's great about Friday the 13th, the first one, is that Jason's not the killer.
After all, this is a story of a mom who loved her son so much that she would lose her head for him.
There's nothing better than going off to a campsite where nobody else is around.
I think Friday the 13th was an anti-sex message, and the best way to treat teens and sex is just with pure carnage.
There's a drop of blood, and we recognize that above the two lovers is a dead body dripping down, and it's like, ew, and it's like, it's so creepy, but all your focus is on the dead body above. And then, completely unexpectedly, the arrow comes from below.
Hey, that's a good way to go after having sex. And you just and blood. Oh, it was so scary.
I fell for the ending of the first Friday the 13th as a kid.
I remember saying to Sean, we should do something like Carrie. Well, what can we do? I mean, Jason, he died a long time ago. I says, well, if it's a dream.
The film is over and it's peaceful and we're in the lake.
You know, the music's played, and so you think that, okay, all these people have died, but they're safe, the police are up on the hill.
Oh, it's gonna be all nice.
My mother went up in the air, 25 feet, screamed, I swear to God. And I heard the guys in the back, like, Paramount, Warner Brothers, whoever it was, with Sean and everything. I said, Mom, I think you just sold the movie.
The scream came out of nowhere. The audience just screamed. Says, whoa, what the hell? Must have been Jason. So then we watched it and forgot all about that. And then we all screamed, so it was quite the moment.
There are moments created by master filmmakers which unleash your childhood fears.
Something can come in and bite you on the neck and turn you into this horrible vampire.
They infuse our nightmares.
The film was so strong that I was sort of worried that I caught some plague off the film.
And terrify us.
Almost every horror movie now has that last little
They push the boundaries.
It's those moments when you think this filmmaker is dangerous.
They make us scream.
For half the movie, I was like,
and jump out of our seats.
First time the shark jumped up, and I jumped. I didn't go out and around like, Daddy. It was just boom, boom.
These are the moments we never forget.
Even
pinhead who doesn't do a decent, nice thing through 8 movies, but somehow or other still manages to get fan mail from women who would like to bear his children.
Presenting the 100 Scariest Movie Moments, a countdown of the greatest moments of cinema shot.
Is this real or is it not? Because of the whole internet event that had happened.
I thought it was real.
The marketing was great. You know, everybody wanted to see it before it was even out.
It was important for us to explore the line between fact and fiction. Were these 3 young filmmakers, did they really go into the woods? Is this really a record of the last moments of their life?
They thought up a great way to torture us before we entered the movie theater.
Before the Blair Witch Project, I always felt very comfortable and very happy. Oh, nature, you know. And after that, for like 2 months, I would hear like the rustling of a tree, and it would send a shiver up my spine.
Nobody had done anything like it before, and it was just weird and crazy, and you're on edge. You don't know what to expect, and that's what you got to do, you know, with horror.
There's strange, like, voodoo dolls hanging from all over the place. To see stuff come from behind or something shoot and the camera would have to turn around, that made that movie so much scarier than just the average, like, 2-3 cameras, and you saw everything come in.
When they were camping and she put the flashlight, like,
we never saw the boogeyman in that movie. We never saw the witch. We only saw what was happening.
Hearing their friends screaming in that way you could only hear sound in the woods, where there's like, you don't know what direction it is, and you just hear, God help me, oh my God. There's nothing they could have filmed that could have been worse than what I was imagining.
These people are looking for the witch's house, and they find it at the end. And it used such simple techniques like child's handprints on the wall. And they said right before she kills you, she sends you in the corner.
And I look over and my buddy, who's like 6'2", 220, is like this.
It's amazing what you can do on like such a low budget movie, just yelps and shadows and screams.
The film was shot for about $40,000, and the film went on to gross domestically $140 million. This is the most profitable motion picture in the history of film.
There was something very real about that movie, that somehow in the way Wes Craven captured the world of voodoo and the stories that floated out about what went on the set, that people from the crew made fun of it and then kind of got zapped with it, I really believe in it.
It's basically based on the discovery of a real-life zombie, somebody who had died in Haiti and who had been declared dead by an American doctor who later, I think a year later, turned up alive.
People are put in boxes and given this potion, and you know, they come back up and their brain's destroyed and they'll do whatever you tell them to do.
It had a supernatural element to it, but it didn't feel far from the truth. He picks very basic common fears.
They give you the Jesus juice, they put you in the box, they nail you, and they leave you there. And what happens is they'll get some voodoo priest to come and undig you, and at that point he'll put the whammy on your head by telling you that you've been dead.
That notion that these people were being buried alive made it more scary than even something that was purely fantasy.
The scene where Bill Pullman says, "Don't bury me, I'm not dead."
Don't bury me. I'm not dead.
You have to watch what you believe, because it can bite you on the ass.
I've even thought about being cremated. Just want to really make sure I'm totally gone.
I was 13. I had a 3-year-old sister, and I babysat for her, and that was kind of my gig.
Every girl hears it the first time she goes to babysit. Somebody tells you the babysitter story. It's one of the classic urban legends.
I literally gave up all babysitting at that point. I swore off it. I wouldn't be home alone.
The power of a lot of frightening movies are the fact that it could happen.
The first 15 minutes of When a Stranger Calls are arguably the scariest 15 minutes in the history of horror cinema.
It was written so intelligently. It was a real old-fashioned sort of Hitchcock suspense movie, the way it was written, and then the way he shot it.
Carol Kane was unbelievable. She was just that low voice of hers and those wide eyes. So anytime she heard a noise in the house, she just immediately look into the camera. And then all of a sudden that great music would come into play.
And at first the calls are just a little creepy. She thinks maybe it's a heavy breather. And then the caller starts telling her to go check the children.
Asking me the proverbial, you know, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Have you checked the children?
One of the classic, literally, jolts of the film is when the terrified babysitter finally calls the police, has them trace the call, and she picks up the phone thinking it's the killer who's calling again.
Leave me alone! Jill, this is Sergeant Sacker. Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Our squad cars are on the way over there right now. Just get out of that house.
That's the ultimate scaredy cat feeling.
Never have two lines in the house.
Never have two lines in the house.
Never. People just screamed at the top of their lungs and stood up and talked back to the screen.
At that point, I sort of emotionally checked out, I think. I went into complete paralysis.
It triggered something in me as a child, hypnotically, that took me to another place.
With the success of Dracula, Universal really felt that it had, you know, found the new Lon Chaney in the person of Bela Lugosi, and were eager to, you know, exploit his talents in other frightening pictures. And it was announced that he was going to play the monster in Frankenstein.
Lugosi was very offended that he would be playing this, like, lumbering, stupid creature that didn't speak, and his face was all covered in makeup.
James Whale spotted Boris Karloff in the Universal Pictures commissary one day.
Mary Shelley's novel and James Whale's film both answer the fundamental horror question, where do monsters come from?
Now when I see some of those scenes, I just think, oh my God, audiences in 31 must have been having a heart attack.
It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive.
The creation of the monster is the creation of the horror film.
The first time he's standing up and walks in comes through the door, it's unbelievable. You know, I still can't believe how effective that makeup is and how Karloff is.
The design of the makeup is so extraordinary, and Karloff's performance is genuinely brilliant. And he manages to be really scary. I mean, there are moments when the monster looks, it's frightening, but then there are moments like when he reaches toward the light that are beautiful.
The thing with Karloff was he had those eyes. He had those dead eyes.
He just wants to make friends. He makes friends with a little girl and accidentally kills her.
There's a little girl picking flowers, and Frankenstein just kind of shows up. And it's this very sweet scene because they're, kind of plucking flowers together. And then he doesn't understand when they've run out of flowers that, the difference between human life and flowers. And so he takes her and throws her in the water.
No, you're hurting me! No!
Carl Laemmle Sr., the head of Universal, was particularly upset by this scene and wanted it cut. The cutting actually made it worse.
They immediately cut to him throwing daisies into the water, to the father carrying the lifeless body of the girl, which just makes the monster look more vicious.
Up next, the 7 sins get a deadly spin. scariest movie moment of all time.
Oh God, I can't tell you. Oh God, oh, you made me strap on a thing and I just... I mean, that really freaked me out.
It's that genre taken almost to an art level.
The murder sequences in Seven are art directed within an inch of their lives. They actually owe a great deal to the Italian horror films of the 70s, what are called the gialli.
The way that David Fincher shot it and how dark it was and the camera angles and just this whole subdued palette of the film
creates the sense that you're in a world that's coming apart.
He was very, very inventive in his different ways that he killed people, and they all gave you the chills.
They built it up with the 7 sins, and you were just knowing, okay, this one just happened, so it's got to be soft or it's got to be hate.
They just talked about what the victims were going through, and they showed pictures, and the reactions of the victims being interviewed after it happens to them is just insane.
Look at this fat, disgusting man that ate himself to death, that couldn't even pick his head up, and it just fell in the bowl of spaghetti.
The details in the murders and the details in the killings were absolutely gruesome.
They find a guy in a apartment, and they walk in, and it's a low angle again, up into the smoky, and there's those Christmas tree air fresheners hanging everywhere, and the first thing you're thinking to yourself is, why the hell is there air fresheners everywhere? And they find this guy who looks like, I don't know if that was an actor, bro, and I hope it wasn't. I hope it was all just a dummy. It looks like a corpse.
It's dated exactly 1 year ago today.
I got a hair sample, I got a stool sample, I got piss, I got fingernails.
He's laughing at us. You got what you deserved.
Your imagination runs wild, which I think is the key to a great scary movie.
We were actually shooting in an embalming room in Long Beach, California, and while we were filming, we were being supervised by the embalmer, and there was a knock at the door, and they had a fresh corpse they needed to bring in, and the embalmer had a donut in his mouth. He goes, "Oh, excuse me, guys, I got to take care of business."
I loved Phantasm because where I lived in Massachusetts sort of looked just like the neighborhood in that movie, and the house I grew up in was about half a block from a cemetery, and there was a mortuary, so it looked almost just like what was in that movie.
The way the kids' room looks sort of reminds me of my own childhood, but also this feeling that you're a kid and that you see things that adults don't.
Angus Scrimm, the tall man, he's one of the great boogeymen in horror film.
We filmed a lot in mortuaries and graveyards, and they do imbue me.
One of the scenes in Phantasm that scared me the most was when that kid's in bed and he has a nightmare sequence and he looks up and he sees the tall man, and the tall man's looking right over him.
I do think that turned out to be one of the most effective scenes in the picture, a real shocker.
Then I go to bed and I sit there and you keep opening your eyes and you can't close your eyes because you keep thinking the next time you open them, the tall man's gonna be there, and you have to kind of get out of bed just looking at the floor, hoping that if he's there, that like he doesn't notice you.
Roses are red, violets are blue, but the iris is the flower that will mean the end of it.
It's a film which doesn't want to follow any rules. You could very well say it was, in some ways, the first punk horror movie.
It's like Douglas Sirk on an acid trip. Suspiria is about a young American ballet student who is going to Germany to study at a prestigious German ballet academy.
When you go to see a Dario Argento movie, you're just watching horrible things happen to people in a beautiful, beautiful way.
As wicked and as violent as they are, they're beautiful. They're lavish colors.
The blood, I mean, is just like red, like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's like almost in-your-face day glow.
He puts the gore in gorgeous.
One of the very last films shot in 3-strip Technicolor.
Dario styled it after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and you can actually see that if you look at it very carefully. He always saw it as like a Walt Disney horror film.
The first 15 minutes, I'm a specialist of the first 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And then this is one of my best.
He comes up with these incredibly elaborate ways to kill people. And there's one great scene in Suspiria where the first girl that dies falls through this huge, beautiful plate glass window.
I think the first 20 minutes of Suspiria have never been rivaled in cinema of horror ever.
Coming up, the video rental that scares you to death. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Something could go wrong when you give birth, you know? There could be any number of things, and this is the ultimate thing that could go wrong.
What are you going to do when you look into the bassinet and you see your child for the first time and it's the devil?
You know, there's this like special, beautiful bond between a woman and her baby that she gives birth to. I think like if your baby has like, you know, black devil eyes and horns and a tail, you know, the bonding is kind of hard.
The Dakota, which is probably one of the scariest buildings architecturally in America. Those gargoyles, that corner, Central Park, Strawberry Fields Forever and all that.
Without the music in Rosemary's Baby, it wouldn't be nearly as scary.
You saw her absolutely surrounded by all these people that could very easily break her.
When you first find out that there are these devil worshippers at play, that gets you.
I don't like those kind of things where you're like, the whole world is against you. Like she you know, Mia Farrow was screwed, man. The whole apartment building was after her.
It's because that guy wanted to make it as an actor. That's why.
Typical New York co-op word.
The doctor tells her, you know, take these pills, don't ask questions, don't read books. Oh, okay, no problem.
I think people can definitely relate to that, to men who are stronger saying, darling, you're just overwrought, why don't you lie down? And the devil will come have sex with you. It's happened to all of us.
The scene in Rosemary's Baby, I guess when she gets drugged up and gets raped by the devil, that can't be fun.
The rape scene is just awful. It's just awful. You don't know what's happening. You don't know if it's real. You're experiencing it like she did.
It's all shot at a vertiginous angle, like you're not quite sure what's happening, and I think that that's what makes it more horrifying, is it is sort of suggested and it's very dreamlike.
When she wakes up the next morning, she thinks it was a dream. And she then discovers scratches on her body, and her husband says, oh, I'm sorry, I was a bit of an animal last night. And that's really clever, because the film is like a dream. And at the end of it, you can't quite remember what you have seen, but what you imagine seeing. And that is smart filmmaking.
Don't Look Now was based on a short novel by Daphne du Maurier, who also wrote the story that Hitchcock turned into Rebecca.
The director, Nicholas Roeg, was not somebody who was known for thrillers. He was a cinematographer turned director with a very, very fine visual eye. For a great deal of its running time, it's very much a psychological story about two people love each other very much, but their marriage has really been shaken by the death of their child. And they go to Venice.
It's what Hitchcock always used to do, of picking the location and then thinking about things.
The husband, Donald Sutherland character, catches glimpses of someone who looks like his dead daughter wearing a red raincoat. At the same time, there's a killer on the loose in the city.
Donald Sutherland finds himself in a room, in a cavernous room, with somebody standing in a red Macintosh, apparently weeping in the corner of the room.
Facing that character and not sure what's going to happen. You find it in films ranging from Blair Witch Project, where you get it at the very end, to The Sentinel, to Dario Argento's Phenomena, to Psycho.
He backs her into a corner and says, it's all right, everything's going to be fine, thinking that what he's doing is finally saving the child that he failed to save in the first reel of the film.
Come on.
Darlings.
It's in fact the person who has been committing the grisly murders which have been going on around the edges of the story all the time they're in Venice.
You are just horrified to see those hopes dashed.
He's like, that's what it is? It's a dwarf in a raincoat?
When the movie screened in New York, I invited like 50 of my friends to come see it. And it was really fascinating because some of them were just absolutely pissed off about the movie. I mean, like really, really, like violently angry. Some people came out going, oh my God, that was like an acid trip. Other people came out and were really like just moved by the movie.
Most horror films go very chronologically, whereas this one throws you off. You know, not only is the protagonist confused, so's the viewer. You're not sure what's real and what happened first.
Tim Robbins' character, he's a Vietnam veteran, he's a mailman, he's a very regular guy who is having what are either the most horrific hallucinations of all time or is being tormented by the creepiest, most deformed demons of all time.
You weren't sure if this was a Vietnam movie. You weren't sure if this was a supernatural movie. You weren't sure if this was just a movie about some guy's psychosis.
What is going on? This is this alternative universe. It's really dark. What's that creeping in the corner?
We know he was in Vietnam. We know he played with some drugs. But the things that we're seeing...
Every once in a while you catch a glimpse of like a tail coming out of someone's back, or...
You'd freak out, I remember that.
And then like you'd have like a head, like somebody, you'd see somebody in distance and they're like going like this.
Shake their head back and forth like this and you can't focus on them. You know, it's just...
that freaks me out.
Just tricks you, man, because it starts off very sexual, like dance scene. Elizabeth Bennia's all hot, like young and spicy, and she's all over Tim Robbins, and all of a sudden his tail comes in and she gets all evil, man, and then you just go,
And then we start hearing flapping. And then we see sort of a tail-like thing coming up in between her legs, moving towards her. And we're like, is she being attacked? Is she becoming this creature?
Freak out because you're right there with him. It's like the one moment that you have safe passage and all of a sudden she's a lizard and you're screwed because you're dancing with the lizard.
We all sit down in front of the TV, perfectly innocent thing, which you would never imagine could be twisted into some horrific moment. But suddenly these filmmakers have figured out a way to really turn that on its head, and it becomes something out of a nightmare.
The Ring is so scary. It's so scary. And I think it's a scary movie because it just seems like it could happen to you.
You know, one of the things that horror does, it lets you deal with your fear, right? Because you're containing your fear in the experience of watching a film, and then once the film is over, you go home. The Ring actually suggests that the act of watching can kill you, right? You watch this videotape and know it's not going to be okay. A week later, you're going to be killed in some way.
Okay, scariest scene in The Ring. I hate even thinking about it, is when the little girl comes out of the well.
When you see things that you've never seen before and you just can't help but be impressed, and if they're well shot and they come as a complete surprise, it gives the film a real potency.
Nothing like an anemic, pasty girl to scare you again.
It was just the shot of this decrepit-looking girl, and there's nothing scarier than a decrepit-looking 8-year-old.
Great makeup job on her face. I think it was Rick Baker. Brilliant, simple, but totally effective. And just the way it's shot and the way that she's walking, and it's just really a beautiful, sublime piece of creepy filmmaking.
First of all, you think the movie is over and you've had a somewhat happy ending.
She goes to her son and she says, you know, oh, it's all okay. We let her go. We did it. And the kid goes, no, you shouldn't have let her go. She's terrible. She's evil.
All the images have been contained. I mean, they're on the tape. They're contained on the TV screen.
So the person's not sure if they're still looking at TV or is this thing really coming until pow!
Moment again where reality is gone.
She breaks the third wall and crawls through the TV screen. It's so scary!
Coming up, a moment inspired by children who died in their sleep. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Well, I was sitting next to my mother, which slightly changed the dynamic. She wept when my name came up and was spelt right. And I said, Mom, that's really the best thing that's gonna happen. Now I'm afraid it's just gonna be sex and violence for the next 90 minutes.
Clive really caught people off guard. I mean, he brought S&M to horror.
Truly the first film that brought a kind of sadomasochistic pain.
S&M, buddy. What's wrong with that?
Pleasure and pain, everyone has a subjective idea of what that is.
Evil is fun, you know, torture is love, murder is affection, you know, it's all these things reversed. And what could be scarier than that?
His visuals in his films are just so creepy and so unsettling.
I went to my local library to find a book on film directing. And they had two, but they were both checked out. And I thought, oh, I'm so I don't even have a book.
One of my most favorite things about a good scary movie is if they have good monsters. And the Cenobites are good monsters.
Pinhead is a jerk. The worst of the Cenobites for my character, Kirsty, because he was the leader.
He's just creepy, man, and the chains whipping around. I mean, he does it all with his head, man. He controls chains.
The villain was this weird box.
The audience doesn't know what to expect as they're opening this Pandora's box. You don't know what experience is going to happen. A freak.
I mean, everybody in that film seemed to me to be in some kind of sublime pain. And it was equal parts S&M, Club, Hieronymus Bosch. I mean, that film really, truly entered my subconscious.
Pinhead, who doesn't do a decent, nice thing through 8 movies, but somehow or other still manages to get fan mail from women who would like to bear his children.
Pinhead. We'll hang out later.
I remember a very short story they used to quote in some analysis of horror literature. They used to say the last man on earth is sitting alone in his room. All of a sudden, a knock on the door.
The genesis
basis for the film is Robert Wise having read Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. And he tells a story that he was reading the book and somebody came into the office and scared the hell out of him. And he thought, well, you know, if that's sort of, you know, if I'm that jumpy from this book, this is probably going to make a pretty good movie.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace? That some houses, like Hill House, are born bad?
This is a story about a group of people who go to a house that's supposedly haunted and they're supposed to record any supernatural activity. And the only thing, literally, that you as an audience member actually experiences in terms of the supernatural is knockings on the door, some kind of shaking furniture, and yet it becomes one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
The Haunting is really a tribute to the dictum that less is more.
There isn't a monster, there isn't a special makeup effect.
You don't see any ghosts. You don't see any blood.
When the whole group is huddled together in the living room and the doors start to bend in from the force outside.
Saying, wow, no monsters, no makeup. That was good, psychological.
God, it knows I'm here.
For 3 years, I had sent that script around to the whole town of Hollywood, and everybody thought it was either stupid or boring or just gory or whatever. I knew by the time we were filming it was going to be strong.
Wes Craven had come across a few articles about some teenagers who were absolutely terrified to go to sleep.
In the middle of the night, they heard these horrendous screams and crashing, and they ran in, and he's thrashing on his bed and ran to him. By the time they got to him, he was dead. They did an autopsy on him, and there was nothing physically wrong with him. And I just thought, my God.
Wes described how he wanted to fool the audience about when the moment of reality ceased to exist and when they were actually into the dream, and how this was his goal. And that's what really intrigued me.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door.
Every time you hear that in any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, you know something bad is about to happen.
Here's a guy who's been probably burned over 90% of his body, and he still wears a hat that covers some of that scarification, which is a sort of weird vein thing.
Those nails, the claws, and the scraping against the pipes.
What is that?
The idea that he's a child murderer and that she's going to avenge this terrible crime that he's committed against her own family, that's a direction that I always had inside of me.
Because he's a dream figure, he can basically do anything. He can transform himself into anything, into a phone, into any kind of creature. And so that's what makes him so powerful, because how do you resist sleep? How do you resist dreaming? He's everywhere.
Everything was a little bit jerry-rigged on our set, just because we didn't have a lot of money.
For my money, it's the revolving room scene where Tina just gets her brains bashed out on the ceiling.
There was something about the vulnerability that she was just in her underwear, and the fact that her boyfriend was trying to reach her but he couldn't. There was no explanation for how she was up on that ceiling, because this guy's in the shot too, and it just worked really strongly.
He just drags her all around the bedroom by his finger claws on the ceiling, blood everywhere, and she's just screaming, and it's just so painful, and they don't cut it, you just watch all of it.
Leatherface grunts and he makes noises. Michael Myers doesn't say a word. Jason doesn't say anything. But Freddy really has personality.
There's a reason that New Line was, and in some circles is still known as the house that Freddy built.
Freddy really has that universal appeal where he will terrify kids kind of under the age of 10. And anyone 15 and up, he says funny jokes and they enjoy it.
And the audiences loved Freddy so much, we exploited what they loved best about Freddy, which was this cruel sort of gallows humor that Freddy had, sort of jamming teen culture back down its own throat.
Coming up, a nurse from the hell makes a house call. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
The Thornes have been a family of tremendous wealth, position, and power. The perfect marriage of Ambassador Robert Thorne and his wife Catherine was fulfilled by the birth of their son, Damien.
I've met like 3 Damiens, and it's like, why would your mother name you Damien?
When the child was 5 years old, something terrible happened.
I was at the hospital, Mr. Thorne, the night your son was born. I saw its mother.
The baby is the son of Satan.
You're looking at the devil incarnate. You're like, he's the devil, and he's on Earth.
You put a little kid in a scary little suit, and you're halfway home. You know, that's scary. Kids in suits are scary.
The nanny is on the balcony, and she says,
"Look at me, Damien. It's all for you."
Jumps out the window and like hangs himself. Going, okay, this is just too creepy.
The photographs all have these strange flaws, the omens of the title that portend how the people are going to die.
Was it an accident?
They just cut that guy's head off. And I'm watching it like spin around in slow motion as it cuts his head off. I went, oh, they really pushed it.
There are those who will die for him. There are those who will kill for him.
It's at night, and you've built up this knowledge, this awareness that the nanny who's moved into this family's house is an apostle of the devil.
Tom? Is that you?
When you get that close-up of her face, you realize, oh my God, Lee Remick is God. Just that last shot, which is Damien staring straight at camera in close-up and smiling.
The little boy waves at the end, and the music, and he's so cute. But, I mean, who can name their kid Damien after that?
Todd Browning is one of the unsung directors of all time.
Metro had seen the amazing success Universal had with Dracula and Frankenstein, and, you know, wanted to do the ultimate horror film.
One of his closest friends was Harry Earls, you know, the midget, and it was Harry Earls who actually came to him with the idea of doing Freaks.
Browning assembled the largest collection of sideshow performers that had ever appeared in one place.
Apparently there was more diva demands on this movie than you could possibly imagine. They really went Hollywood, the Freaks, on the movie. And of course Browning indulged them.
This created some real problems at the MGM commissary. People were really upset that Siamese twins and pinheads and armless, legless people were sitting at the next table.
I always loved Freaks, I mean, because, you know, it was real.
What he does successfully is he makes you totally comfortable with the freaks. So instead of being repulsed, we learn to like them.
There's the famous scene at the end where Harry Earl, he has like this beautiful woman who he's engaged to. She's an acrobat. And the other freaks catch wind of the fact that she just wants him for his money. Where a circus freak makes so much money from is anybody's guess. But okay, he was rich.
The most frightening scene in Freaks is obviously the climax, where the circus performers have their revenge.
There's that wonderful moment when they're going gooble, gobble, we will make you one of us. And it's joyous and it's freakish, but it's happy. You share the revulsion of the villains, but you also share the joy of the freaks.
It's all done in very, very silent movie imagery, you know, flashing thunderstorms.
There's this one guy in there who has, it's a head, he's a head, it's a black guy, and he has no body. He has literally like a sock He has no arms or legs, it's his thing. And he rolls a cigarette with his tongue and lips.
I can't roll and light a cigarette with 2 hands and 2 feet and a cigarette rolling machine.
With someone helping you?
Yeah.
But in the rain, when they're coming to kill them, there's this shot of him crawling along the ground with a knife in his mouth. And I was thinking, what the hell is he going to do with that?
All-time pinnacles of shock in cinema as far as I'm concerned.
If you wanted to remake Freaks, you go, yeah, we're going to use real deformed children and, you know, adults in our movie as the stars. I mean, there'd be no way.
You do feel so strongly for these characters. They've been pushed to the edge, and they actually are going to do to this human woman what nature has done to them.
Halloween's innovation was, one, Halloween, you know, I mean, actually taking Halloween and the concept of the boogeyman and putting teenagers in jeopardy.
This was a work for hire, okay? My job was to make a movie about babysitters in the Midwest being stalked by a killer, and you set it on Halloween. That's it. That's what Irwin Yablans wanted. That's the kind of exploitation horror movie he wanted. The rest was me. I was trying to make something out of it.
There was something so simple about Mike Myers that is just great. A person who killed as a child, and he's been in an asylum his whole life, and he broke out on Halloween night.
My production designer, Tommy Lee Wallace, we didn't have any money on this film, so he went up to a magic shop on Hollywood Boulevard and bought back 2 masks. One was a clown mask, and he brought back a William Shatner Star Trek mask.
There was such a blank face that the audience could project anything they wanted on it.
As I've said, I owe my entire career to William Shatner.
Carpenter, yeah, is a real one-man band of a filmmaker, and very importantly, composed that really distinctive piano.
The moment he was about to kill someone, all of a sudden you'd hear dun, dun, dun.
The music's actually as scary as the movie is. It was Deborah Hill's idea to cast Jamie Lee Curtis. I had wanted another actress, and she turned us down. Everybody turned us down for this film. Nobody wanted to be in it. She told me that her screams were like her orgasms. That's what she said. I think she's just trying to be nice to an old guy.
It's the least explicit of all those movies. I mean, after that come Friday the 13th, of course, and Tom Savini gore effects. But in Halloween, you virtually don't see a drop of blood. It's all about terror.
The biggest screams in Halloween come after she's killed him in the closet.
Now I want you to go down the street to the Mackenzie's house. I want you to tell them to call the police and tell them to send them over here. Now, do you understand me? Yes. Go do as I say.
Your attention is focused on Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a nice close-up. You can see that she's tired, but there's a little relief coming.
And they say, no, no.
Oh, no. You know, oh, God, she just put a hanger in his eye.
Man, is it simple. Guy with mask and knife stalks teenagers. And here we are all these years later, still watching it and still talking about it.
There are moments created by master filmmakers which unleash our childhood fears.
Something can come in and bite you on the neck and turn you into this horrible vampire.
They infuse our nightmares.
The film was so strong that I was sort of worried that I caught some plague off the film.
And terrify us.
Almost every horror movie now has that last little
They push the boundaries.
It's those moments when you think this filmmaker is dangerous.
They make us scream.
For half the movie, I was like,
and jump out of our seats.
First time the shark jumped up, and I jumped. I didn't go out and around like, Daddy. It was just boom, boom.
These are the moments we never forget.
Even Pinhead, who doesn't do a decent, nice thing through 8 movies, but somehow or other still manages to get fan mail from women who would like to bear his children.
Presenting the 100 Scariest Movie Moments, a countdown of the greatest moments of cinema shock.
It was fantastic. It was the most scary thing. I would watch it like this, and I still can't watch it all the way through. It really does frighten me.
I first passed on it because I was in one of those crises where I think I've got to do a normal film. And so in this opening where the girl is gutted and everything else, I said, I just can't do it again. And then I was doing an appearance someplace, and some little kid came up to me, you know, I love Last House on the Left. You should do something that really kicks ass again. I thought, God, I must be getting soft. And I literally called up Bob Weinstein and said, you know, okay, let's do it.
When Scream first came out, I thought, well, is the horror film dead now? Once we make a film that parodies it. The kids are very savvy about, you know, what kinds of rules do you have to follow to not be killed in the horror film. It's really a film about the horror film audience.
I was a huge fan and read the script and thought this is so different than most of them. It kind of made it was like a little bit of a spoof, but it was still really scary.
I had never seen a script that was quite like this. It was a horror film, but it was, and a slasher film, but it was also a murder mystery. And then it was also a soap opera. So I thought, wow, it's got these three weird elements woven together. This is going to be good. What Bob Weinstein was able to do was first say, I'm going to put real money into this film, and I'm going to get really known actors and actresses.
I wanted to play Gail Weathers because she was just a real bitchy character, and I thought it would be really fun to play something that wasn't, you know, I was on Friends, and I played this nice girl, Monica, but Gail was just so ruthless.
At the beginning of that film, Craven delivers an absolutely beautifully pitched teenage slasher murder.
It was really a pure Wes Craven kind of setup.
To make a really strong horror film, you need to nail the audience almost immediately. And you don't need to hit them as hard ever again in the film until the ending. And that opening, I knew if I was able to pull it off, would do it.
This is how you do a terrorized teenager gets killed.
You have a killer who, A, is speaking from a cell phone, which had not been done in a film before, and B, is smart.
It just set the tone of the entire movie.
What's your name?
Why?
Oh, because I want to know who I'm looking at.
That gives me the chills just to think. I mean, just to think you're in a house and there's all these windows around you and you don't, and someone is watching you.
Please leave me alone.
Answer the question and I will. What door am I at?
What?
There are two main doors to your house, a front door and the patio doors. If you answer correctly, you live. Very simple.
Don't do this, I can't, I won't.
Your call.
You have Drew Barrymore, we feel like we're safe, and boom, she's dead in like a heartbeat, and all of a sudden it's a free-for-all. It's anyone can go at that point.
Because it's become iconic so quickly, it's hard to see it as scary anymore. The first time you ever see the caped figure in the mask with the black cloak, it is scary.
It's all about the fear that artists have that if they've gotten a success in a certain area, that if they change or grow or do something different, that their fans will leave them, and the feeling that their fans will hate them.
I've had some experience with fans that are clearly a little bit loose in their shoes. They don't have, their elevators don't go all the way to the top.
Famous writer finishes his novel, comes down from the mountain. It's a tradition he has. He wrecks his car in a snowstorm.
Kathy Bates comes and rescues him from the snow. She puts him over her shoulder. She's so beefy. Yeah. She carries him back. She puts him in a bed in her house, and you're like, oh.
You got that warm fuzzy. He's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be fine.
James Caan was completely and utterly stir crazy by doing this movie, and every day he would come to work, and I would say to him, okay, now Jimmy, in this scene, I want you to be in bed.
Most of that film takes place in a bedroom. So, you know, like Hitchcock's Rear Window, to keep the tension alive in a movie like that takes a lot of technique and craft.
The scariest thing about it is just that idea, you know, because I have some nutty fans. And I'm always a little worried, you know.
Love can turn into a really sort of perverted thing.
She's like, oh, did you write that book, Misery? Because I love that book, Misery.
She
was so frightening.
What made it frightening was the fact that she was so sweet. You could feel like she likes to bake cookies.
The movie doesn't work without her, or without somebody that could, you know, play that character as well.
When I saw some of the dailies, oh, she was to die for. She was so good. She just inhabited that part.
I personally don't get scared at the Freddys and the Jasons, the whole thing, because I know it's made up. I know that. But when it's a real person who actually could harm you, that to me cuts deeper than anything else.
She's got the log, or whatever she's got, that thing, and she kind of puts it in between his feet, and you're like, okay, well, what's she doing there?
It was the ultimate moment for her to make sure that he wouldn't run away.
And there's nothing he can do, and he's just laying there, and he knows what's gonna happen, and his eyes just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I mean, that's just like, okay, it really went south after there.
Annie, whatever you're thinking about doing, please don't do it. Annie, for God's...
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Annie, please!
Boom! Wham! Oh! Everybody went, oh, and squirmed and moved, and it became this very mobile moment.
She put that block between his thing, and then she just clobbers that foot, and you're like, no, and then his foot goes sideways.
Great shot of the foot. Swings to one side. Now, what it really is it's a foot model that's been filled with jelly.
Andy Scheinman, I think, came up with the idea of putting the block of wood between his feet so that when she hit his ankle would just, go whang, like a swinging door.
After that movie, I didn't walk for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I just sat on a chair.
I think that right now, the only people that are making real horror movies are the Asian horror films, Japanese horror films. They're so unbelievably terrifying.
Audition, I just found so deeply disturbing on every level. I found it so creepy, I didn't like it.
I never feel creeped out by movies. I just watch them and kind of enjoy them. And that was the first time I watched it, just starting to feel this movie's creeping me out.
Audition is such a brilliant film because the whole movie is a build-up to the last 15 minutes. And so few films do that anymore. This guy meets this girl, and they set him up as the nicest guy in the world. And he holds this fake audition, and he meets this girl, and he says he's gonna call her. And she's like, yes, I'll wait for your call. And then you see her, and she's staring at her phone. And you're going, oh my God, she's insane. And then this sack just starts rolling around and you hear a human voice, and then it cuts away. That terrified me more than anything.
Slow, and it just kind of it sneaks up on you when it happens. It so shocks you.
So they just build up this tension like a tightrope. You just feel like it's this cable that's gonna snap. And then the last 15 minutes of that movie, you can't even look at the screen.
The girl in the movie is so likable and so nice, and just when the finally shows her in her apartment, and he's like the guy in the bag.
And this guy, he's missing his legs, he's missing his fingers, he's missing his tongue, he's missing his ear, and we see her vomit into a bowl and feed it to him.
That's so disturbing.
Then we go right into the torture scene.
What is going on? Just like...
She's there, she's in her white dress with her black leather apron, black leather gloves, and she's ready for some meat work.
It really messes with you.
She's so soft and sweet, and her torture weapons are very delicate, very slowly plunging the acupuncture needles into his chest, into his eyeballs, and then by the time she starts working on his foot, she's just diving into it with this girlish glee.
It's like so out of control.
There's some horror movies I go, well, this is unpleasant. Why do I want to be here? You know,
Living in New York City, I've dated a few psychos, and there's sometimes where you're on a date with a girl and you're like, oh my God, this chick is totally nuts. And Audition is like the ultimate version of that horrible, horrible, horrible date scenario.
Audition remains too real, I think. And genuinely, you think, what were they thinking?
Coming up, a Cinderella story by way of Stephen King. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Wait Until Dark is based on the stage play by Frederick Knott.
He was very famous because he'd done Dial M for Murder for Hitchcock already.
Audrey Hepburn, the role you're going to remember whenever you're alone.
Audrey Hepburn, does she have a doll stuffed with heroin or not? 3 criminals are trying to find out if she does, and they're going to terrorize her until she gives it up. What Terence Young, the director, did, which I think was really clever, was actually set it in a basement, and it's all completely enclosed like a prison cell. The reason I think the film works so well is because of Audrey Hepburn. The audience always loved her in anything she did. I mean, they always wanted to protect her. Alan Arkin, who plays one of the greatest villains of all time in this, I think, really nasty. He sort of does it semi-hammy, but semi-evil. It's a brilliant performance.
What a blackout scene does is it forces the audience to fill in the blanks. But this blackout scene, in addition, makes us blind, the way Audrey Hepburn is blind.
During the last 8 minutes of this picture, the theater...
The scariest moment of the blackout scene is where Alan Arkin has been stabbed.
He's moved all the furniture in the way, and she's sort of tripping all over it.
Window.
Alan Arkin leaps out and says, boo! And the audience goes, yeah!
And I remember everyone leaping out of their seat at that moment. It was one of the biggest shocks anybody had had since Psycho.
Suddenly being literally confronted with death. Mortality, am I safe? Oh my God. You know, so it's a very effective moment.
Oh, God!
We actually finished Night of the Living Dead here in Pittsburgh, threw it in the trunk of the car, literally threw it in the trunk of a car, and drove to New York with it to see if anybody would want to show it. That night, while Russ Streiner and I were driving in New York, we heard on the news, on the car radio, that Martin Luther King had been shot.
As a young black theater person, it was refreshing to see a film that had what I thought was one of the few African-American leads.
To have a black hero on film was something that was not common at all during this time.
I wanted it to be more about revolution, a revolutionary society, literally, in this case, devouring the old.
Completely outrageous, you know, people, you know, half nude and eating human flesh and everything else. And then at the end you realize, my God, this guy has made a political statement.
That whole image of what we as society do to ourselves in order to sustain ourselves at the expense of our fellow man.
We were trying to make a little horror movie that had a little more to it, that had some, you know, social satire, but we never thought that it was going to ever become what it's become.
Basically, all the people who are zombies were friends of theirs or people who lived locally. They had a friend who was a butcher who just donated all these kinds of pieces of meat for the, you know, body-eating scenes. And it was made with no money at all, and yet it became a huge cult success.
I was playing like in a different state, and I had to ride 2 hours home on my bicycle at like 2 o'clock in the morning all by myself. I was like,
mix that documentary style with the black and white and people eating people, and you know, and you're in the drive-in, you're in the car, and you hope the car starts at the end of the day.
That's the first time that I was scared. I
was really scared by a movie.
Just the absolute relentlessness that no matter where you turned, there was something or someone that would get you and kill you.
There's a sense of claustrophobia in that film that's unbelievable.
It could be a kid, it could be your grandmother, it could be your parents, it could be your wife, your boyfriend.
The monster is the neighbors, and to me, the scariest thing in the world is the neighbors.
Man, that was like, you know, you had never seen anything like that.
We were trying to push the envelope a little bit and not cut away when the zombies, you know, started to eat people. We wanted to stay with it.
It just opened my eyes. You know, it's like, I've told George this many times, it's like that's where I realized that a horror film can be, it can go as deep as you're capable of taking it, you know, and as high, and as long as you scare the shit out of people.
High school is hell, and the further down the ladder you are, the more like hell it becomes. And for kids like Carrie, it's really like the ninth circle of hell.
The girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And I said, wouldn't it be fantastic to give them powers that would allow them to get back at the kids who torment them?
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
It does start out as your typical teen movie.
Just this incredible portrait of a teenage girl.
It really touches a part in you that feels ostracized.
It was such a great film, and she was so vulnerable, and I mean, everything from her first period in the shower, it was so painful, and the embarrassment that she went through, and hey, Norma, she wants a tampon.
And everyone makes fun of her. The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
The relationship between Carrie and her mother, some of the scariest things I've seen on screen.
Her mother was such a whack job.
All the biblical references and calling them her dirty pillows.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways.
That really, really scared me in that film.
It's basically the Cinderella story as done by Stephen King, isn't it? Going to the prom, something horrible happens, she doesn't lose her glass slipper, but she just goes, you know, berserk.
It's horrifying. And then you look at her eyes and you realize something really bad is about to happen.
Carrie lets the bitches have it.
And then at the very end, you know, Amy Irving, Susan Snell.
She's walking down a street, she's in a pretty dress, everything seems very calm.
He asked the actress to walk backwards, and he filmed it in reverse, so it looks like she's walking forwards, but it creates this very dreamlike, very slow, very kind of unnatural pacing.
She goes to the grave and she puts flowers down on the grave. Of us, there are two huge African-American men, 250-pounders at least. They're screaming like children. They're grabbing each other around the neck, and one of them says to the other, that's it, she ain't never gonna be right. And I looked at my wife and I said, this movie's gonna be huge.
Coming up, a massacre inspired by the power tools at Sears. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Silence of the Lambs was the first horror movie that swept the Oscars since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Jonathan Demme sent me the script, and I thought, this is the best horror script I've ever read. And the beauty of it is, the monster was not a creature. The monster was a man.
Buffalo Bill was a scary-ass killer. Totally insane and totally terrifying. but isn't trying to be scary.
The dance that he does.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
He's sewing the skin together of all the women that he's murdered.
The character of Hannibal Lecter, who was just so appealing to the public. He's just the most kind of sophisticated individual you can imagine, who manages to kind of manipulate people around him and spectators into actually forgetting the fact that he's a cannibal.
If you met him at a party, you would want him to like you.
There's always the joke that he likes to eat his victims with Chianti and, and fava beans.
Hannibal Lecter is, if anything, operatic.
He's the kind of guy you want to quote, you want to hang out with. You're on his side also in a lot of the film, which is really upsetting, I think, to a spectator, that the film really tricks us in a lot of ways into kind of being on Hannibal's side, as opposed to Buffalo Bill, who's, in a lot of ways the real monster of the film.
When he escaped it and killed the guard, he killed him gleefully. He killed him in a way that said, "Oh, I'm out of here, man."
When he splays and butterflies, that guy, when he escaped that cage, I mean, that is nasty.
He's in a cage. He's in the middle of this huge room.
Give me one of these guys.
Out there somewhere, he still wants to eat people.
I had my older brother with me, and we saw it at the movies, and I had to go to the bathroom afterwards, and I made him come into the girls' bathroom with me.
I was ahead in the 60s, and I don't mean I was ahead of other people. I mean I was ahead. Dropped a lot of acid, did a lot of peyote, got stoned, went to see 2001, kind of like, oh, wow, I was thrilled at the idea that he was going to make my book into a film.
So many people, you hear the soft people, yeah, I don't really like horror movies, but they always love The Shining.
It was so eerie and strange, and it's one of those movies that you had to see a few times to actually uncover more and figure out.
You have a family, which you can already sense is having issues. Going to a hotel in the middle of nowhere and being left to take care of it with no one else there.
You're scared for them before anything really starts to happen.
Most horror pictures, when the scary stuff starts, then they find the phone's out and the MR's right. Here, we knew that at the beginning.
They're so isolated, and the quiet is what gets to me.
The hotel was given all the space in the frame, and the characters were often quite small within the space, and so you're feeling that the hotel is becoming a character in the film.
You feel the cold, and you feel the loneliness, and you feel the sort of weirdness.
Jack Nicholson's son on that tricycle.
On the wooden floor, and then over the carpet, and then the wooden floor and the carpet, and just the sound effects there, and it's weird, but it gives you this creepy kind of sensibility.
One of the most terrifying images from that film are the two little girls,
which scare me more than Jack Nicholson with an axe.
Come play with us. Come play with us.
It's something that's been satirized since. But the first time that you see it, it's dreadfully unsettling.
The scariest thing about that movie is the things that are unexplained.
And there's the scene where at the end where Shelley Duvall's running through the hotel and she looks down all these different corridors and she just sees a guy in a bear suit and another guy in a tuxedo, and there's some kind of sex thing happening. You don't know what's going on, but you know it's not good.
When Jack Nicholson goes into that room, there's like the beautiful woman in the bathtub, and he's kissing her and turns into that hideous woman. It's disgusting.
You don't know whether the horror that takes place is the product of the hotel or is the product of the Jack Torrance character.
The most frightening part in the movie is where Shelley Duvall goes downstairs and she looks at the novel that Jack Nicholson has been writing all this time.
Picks up that top page and sees the words, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, written over and over and over again on reams and reams of pages in different configurations.
What's scary is the look on Shelley Duvall's face, and it's wordless great acting.
You realize not only that he's going crazy, but how long he's been going crazy.
How do you like it?
That to me is one of the scariest moments in all of movies.
That's a truly frightening thing, to realize that you're living with somebody that you don't even know.
I was in a shopping mall, and the crowds were closing in. I was wondering, how in the hell can I get out of here? And as I had that thought, I found myself, I was standing in the hardware department. My focus from the crowd racked focus into close-up, and there's this display of chainsaws in front of me.
What happened was true.
Toby is this quiet, self-effacing, sweet man who is capable of thinking ways that you wouldn't dare think.
And one of the things a piece of fiction like Texas Chainsaw Massacre could present to us is that this is the real thing.
Like a snuff movie or a documentary or just some newsreel footage. It didn't feel like a movie.
The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Yeah, here's something. Stop! Stop!
I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre mostly like this.
That's just an all-around creepy movie, like, you just feel disgusting. Yeah, that's like I gotta take a shower movie.
I think it got banned actually in New Zealand, and it was before the time of video, and there was just no way to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But a company in England released it on Super 8. I remember being so affected by it that I watched it, and as soon as it was finished, I wound the reels back and I started it all over again.
This was a movie where it's very much about the killers and what goes on in their world and what happens. And it's so disturbing and creepy.
They're at the dinner table every night, you know, they're respecting their grandfather, but at the same time, they're, you know, eating flesh.
Putting the hammer in Grandpa's hand to try and help him club his last victim it's really funny. It's sick, but it's really funny.
And it's another one where you're watching going, are these actors, or did he just find crazy people to be in a movie? But boy, these crazy people sure can't act well.
The way it was shot in daylight, so unconventional, complete horror.
There's no doubt that the scene where Leatherface just suddenly comes out of that doorway, and it's very naturalistic, and you're kind of getting bored, and you think, come on, what's going to happen? And suddenly, whoom, and bang.
And Leatherface grabs him, just hits him, and there's this,
oh, and it made that crack sound, and then boom, you're down.
slams the door and you see this.
He's in the lair now. He's in the cave of hell.
You don't see anything in that movie. It happens behind closed doors. And your mind creates what happened.
And that's the genius of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is that it's essentially a bloodless film, yet it's remembered as being one of the goriest, bloodiest films of all time.
Coming up, Evangelist claims Satan was actually on this film. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
Whenever you're in the shower and you can't really hear.
Psycho is the most shocking movie of all time.
I still envy anybody who doesn't know what Psycho is about and who goes to see it for the first time.
Hitchcock said, no one can come in after the movie again. And he had to convince theater owners that this was worth their while to do. And of course, it was an enormously successful device.
Good afternoon. Here we have a quiet little motel.
Psycho was a novel by Robert Bloch. It was based pretty loosely on the real-life case of Wisconsin cannibal killer Ed Gein.
People lived alongside Ed Gein for ages, and then they discovered that he was a necrophiliac. The terrifying monster may be the guy sitting next to you.
Anthony Perkins, up until that point, had been playing the boy next door.
And in this house, the most dire, horrible events took place.
This was about severe mother issues. He had a very controlling mother.
Norman!
Yes, Mother?
Who's that girl you're talking to, Norman?
Oh, she's a nice girl, Mom. She's really all you would love her.
She's a whore! A filthy whore!
I think some of her clothes are still in this wardrobe.
It's not particularly showy. It was made on the cheap.
All of the people that worked on his television show were working on the picture.
The idea of killing off the main character of your movie 30 minutes into it, you know, it's so brave.
She's gonna be safe. She's a big star.
You think you see the stabs, you think you see the knife going in the body, you don't. It's all very elliptical. Bernard Herrmann's music. How simple are those violins just sort of like screeching away in the background, but how effective is it?
What the shower scene did was set you up.
The only person that's left for you to relate to is Norman Bates.
When he puts Marion's body in the trunk of the car and drives it in the bog and it sinks and then stops, we, the audience, are going, oh my God, he'll get caught.
The scene where I jumped was Martin Balsam's coming up the stairs.
When we see that door open a crack, we are terrified for him.
Every muscle is tense, everything about your body is tense.
The way in which the scene is constructed and shot is like a dream.
And when he's falling down the stairs, it's so surreal looking.
Dropped out the first time I saw it because I felt like I was falling backwards.
It's almost like, okay, reality has just been killed.
Yeah, I went nuts. It was terrifying.
The victim tumbled and fell with a horrible crash.
Every slasher film, no matter how exploitative or cheaply made, has a dark, threatening psychosis. And every psychological thriller, no matter how polished or pretentious, has inside of it a slasher film waiting to get you. And Hitchcock invented them both.
Something beyond comprehension is happening to a little girl on this street, in this house. A man has been sent for as a last resort to try and save her.
Things happened that were beyond anything we had ever seen. We were shocked into terror.
I know people that, as a kid, adults that went to see that movie and were like in therapy afterwards.
Billy Graham, the evangelist, said that there was an evil hiding in the celluloid itself.
That was the one time that I fully felt like this filmmaker has no system of morality or ethics or scruples about what he is going to show, and that's really scary.
To really reach deep down into the chill factor of your soul, you know, that's The Exorcist.
First night where Mom's going to let me babysit my little brother, so it's just the two of us home alone. We're like, let's watch The Exorcist. Yeah, it was a good move.
I told my mom that I snuck in to see it, and I think I got in trouble, but I needed to tell her because I wasn't like, I wanted to get grounded, so she would like hover over me a little.
Strangely enough, there's no gore and there is no sex in it, despite the crucifix masturbation sequence.
It's those moments when you think that this filmmaker is dangerous. I think it's that sense that this guy is dangerous. He's going to harm me psychically, you know.
It's happening to this little girl who's done nothing wrong, and there's no reason for her to deserve any of this. And the most horrible force in the world has taken over this little girl, and it's done in such a realistic way.
battle between good and evil, and the power of Christ compels you, and you totally buy it. It takes a basically ludicrous premise. You know, Satan is in the body of this little girl, and somehow the church, when they're not molesting young boys, will protect us from Satan. And it makes you totally believe it.
The first time that the little girl spoke in the demon's voice, I mean, that was shocking.
Your mother sucks in hell. That was the worst, the absolute worst.
She starts speaking in Italian to the one guy, and he's like, Mama? No, devil!
And all of a sudden, like green vomit just spits out, and she spits it on a priest.
Dump the holy water in buckets!
I don't remember a second of wondering how they did something in The Exorcist. It's like, oh, you know?
It was almost like a documentary of what would happen if the devil possessed somebody.
When she just turns and her eyes change, and I just remember feeling this like,
you didn't see, well, that's what I expected Demon to look like. It was like, oh my God.
Oh my God, look at what is happening to her head.
Dick Smith, who is one of the great makeup effects artists of all time, built a complete body and a complete duplicate head that would be able to do that.
That moment when her head spun around, a Hispanic lady stood up from her seat, screaming in Spanish, and ran out of the theater.
Begone! In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, by this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Damien!
Amen.
God, defender of the humans!
The hair on the back of my neck went up, and I'd never had that happen before in my life. I thought that was just a figure of speech. I was so frightened, I considered running out of the theater. It was like, you're just like hanging on. Your brain is completely befuddled by it. When you suspend disbelief like that, when they make you in the moment, that's a great film.
Coming up, the scariest moment of all time. We're counting down to the scariest movie moment of all time.
You got sort of the best of both worlds, of the fantasy world as well as the reality.
It was unknown times 1,000.
All of that terrifying, horrifying, and gross out, all was used in the movie Alien by Ridley Scott.
It's Halloween in space. Simple idea, and you play it through.
Alien, they always classify it as science fiction, and it's not science fiction, it's gothic horror.
It solves the ultimate problem of the haunted house. Why don't those people just get out of the house? Well, in Alien, there is nowhere to go.
And it even had, like, you know, Harry Dean Stanton going, here, kitty, kitty. I mean, it had classic old dark house put in this new setting.
That run-down, beat-up-looking future.
Any movie that's that claustrophobic is scary.
If you look at Kubrick's 2001, that was the white-collar space. And then you look at Alien and all the Alien rip-offs, it's blue-collar space.
But when you first saw that Giger design for the first time, it was so insane.
Giger's design of that creature was just totally nightmarish. The way Ridley shot it, I couldn't comprehend what it was, and I couldn't really see it.
You never saw that creature until the very end. You saw a tongue, you saw a face, you saw slobber.
Some of those aliens had like really weird tongues.
It's a very sexual film because it's about people getting violated. When that thing was on John Hurt's face, and then like the, you know, its penis went into his mouth. It inseminated it. Whatever it was, whatever it is that went into his throat.
I don't think it was a penis.
I think it was alien penis.
The absolutely hands down scariest scene in Alien is the scene that looks as though it's the calm after the storm.
Ridley Scott kind of lures you in with this naturalistic conversation. And I think there's a naturalistic conversation which feels very much like improv.
It's all normal, and they're eating.
Sort of having dinner, basically, eating those sort of space crackers.
And then John Hurt starts to cough.
A lot of his success had to do with the misdirection. You just absolutely did not expect that to happen.
Completely unexpected, and it goes right to one of the core fears of human beings, is that you don't want anything to get inside of your body.
I just felt like I had gotten such a sucker punch.
What the hell is going on? That got me. I had to change my underwear.
And that look on Veronica Cartwright's face when she gets sprayed with the blood, I mean, it's real. It was terrifying.
And that wonderful little moment where it goes before it runs away, because it was so startling. They made it very real. They took something ridiculous and made it very real.
I sat there frozen like this for the rest of the movie until it was over, and then I went outside and I threw up everywhere. Alien was the first movie that made me barf. That's why it always holds a special place in my heart.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill.
Some ideas are so obvious, they're right in front of us all the time, we just don't see them.
A mindless eating machine.
How could we not have known there was the best, exciting, suspenseful movie to be made about a fucking huge white shark that ate you up?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I remember leaving the theater, and we went to like, I don't know, Denny's or something. I had to go to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom in Denny's, still somehow feeling as if I was going to be attacked by a shark.
I'm in a swimming pool with chlorine, and I'm like, shark. Shark is coming.
The theater was so sold out that I had to sit a few rows back. And I remember the first time the shark jumped up, and I jumped. I didn't go out and around like, Daddy. It was just boom, boom, and I was 2 rows ahead, and I was in his lap.
The idea of really being eaten by an animal came home right into my DNA.
It's not as if a shark never ate anybody. It's not a made-up scare.
No matter what you do, it keeps coming. And every time it comes again, it's angrier and hungrier.
You see the point of view of Jaws, and they're these little flailing kid legs.
Jaws is one of those miracle movies where apparently everything went wrong that could go wrong.
There was this amazing mechanical shark, and it didn't work, so he couldn't shoot it as much as he wanted to. That's one of the things that helped build our terror.
To be quite honest, I mean, the shark actually delivered, you know, which for its time was quite remarkable. When Roy Schneider's chucking the offal off the back of the boat, and he's talking.
Yeah, why don't you tell the Queen to come down here and chow me? You gotta do that. And then the shark pops up.
And he has that perfect, like, reaction where he bolts up, and it's like the whole audience had that same reaction, too.
The music was an amazing element.
It's the portent of something. That music makes you know, uh-oh.
The film opens with a scare.
The girl goes skinny dipping. She like rips off her clothes, runs into the ocean. She's like feeling good. Hey, what's your name? Huh? What? What?
She goes into the water, and the guys following, they're kind of drunk.
It's nighttime and I'm in the ocean. What could possibly happen?
The girl, how you doing? I mean, you're thinking of her legs being chopped off or the side of her being bitten. You're not seeing it, but you're thinking it.
Such a vulnerable feeling, and in this vast ocean where help could be so far away.
It cuts right to a fear that you have, that everyone has. When you go swimming, something like that could happen at a moment's notice.
Tuesday,
Bravo takes you back into the world of the Real Housewives. New beginnings.
The children are blending really well.
And a new neighbor.
I am the hottest housewife in Orange County.
The Real Housewives of Orange County. Caution.
Adults at play.
The new season starts Tuesday at 10/9 Central.
Only on Bravo.